Daniel chapter 6. How exciting. I think you've got your lecture with you. Those of you that don't have it, you have your Bible. Let me just refresh your memory for a moment, please. Daniel chapter 1 was about Daniel and his three friends that were in exile in Babylon. Daniel chapter 2, Daniel and the interpretation of King Nebuchadnezzar's dream. You will remember that. Daniel chapter 3, Daniel is three friends that were in the burning oven. And Daniel chapter 4, King Nebuchadnezzar's dream that he had about himself. Not about his kingdom, but about himself. And then Daniel chapter 5, last week, we looked at King Belshazzar and the writing on the wall and the death, subsequent death of King Belshazzar. Now, why am I telling you that? Because the first 6 chapters of the book of Daniel, first 6 chapters, is pure from a historical point of view, written, put together, not in a chronological order though, but yes, the experiences of Daniel and his three friends is written down, and we have it in the first 6 chapters. Once we finish with chapter 6, it is the so-called historical section of the book of Daniel. We will go immediately into the prophetic, apocalyptic scriptures. In other words, prophecies concerning world kingdoms, the appearance of the Antichrist in the last days, and the end of the world, and how the Jewish people will be saved, and how Jesus will come back to earth. All in the last 6 chapters. So for now, what is very, very important is we are going to look at the last historical chapter about the life of Daniel. Hereafter, we don't read much about Daniel's life. In actual fact, it's pure prophecy, chapter 6 until chapter 12. And of course, a few verses speaking about the personal life of Daniel. But this is the last chapter concerning the life of Daniel. And it also has been a test in his life. You know, you can live your life and you can have a good life, and then just one day God walk into your life and you are severely tested, your faith, when you expected it the least. Daniel is an old man now, and never would he expected that in his old age that he would be placed in a position that has been placed in this chapter. To me, every time I read it, I am amazed what people are thinking about Daniel, how godless they can be, and how evil their hearts can be concerning a righteous man of God. It's actually shocking. But let's read it together, and let the Lord share this precious scriptures with us at this moment. Daniel in the lion's den. You know, we all grew up in Sunday school classes. You remember? And you had the story of David and Goliath and Daniel and his three friends, and how his friends was in the fiery oven, and what happened with them there, and then Daniel in a lion's den. Well, here it is. It is not just a story, a Sunday school story. It is a truth. Verse 1 and 2. And Darius the Mede took over the kingdom at the age of 62. That's when he became the king there. It pleased Darius to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom, with 3 administrators over them, one of whom was Daniel. He's been an old man now. Daniel, probably at this point in time, according to scholars, must have been very close to in the vicinity of about 80 to 83 years old. The satraps were made accountable to them so that the king might not suffer loss. So what we do find in this portion of scripture is that Daniel has got a very high position. What is amazing is he had a very high position in the kingdom of gold under King Nebuchadnezzar. Now that the next empire, the Medo-Persian Empire, later on it became also Persian, but in the beginning, the Medo. So what happened was, even Daniel was one of the ministers in this kingdom. He went from this kingdom to this kingdom. He's still in the palace after all the years. And so one of the things that's very clear here is that, as we read there, it pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps. Because the previous verse in chapter 5, verse 31 says, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom being about 62 years old. So what the Bible is telling us is that the Babylonian Empire, the Golden Empire, is gone. Now we go to the silver, which is from the Lion Kingdom to the Bear Kingdom. And still the man of God is there. The greatest Gentile king that ever lived, he died, but God's man is still there. And so Darius, he was the king in Babylon. And of course, you must remember, it's a Gentile kingdom. What is the purpose? The purpose is Israel, the nation of God. Many of them are still in exile. We know that when we come to the end of this empire, somewhere there, that many of them will be told they can go back to Jerusalem. But at this point in time, it is what it is. We are now in the silver kingdom, the time of the bear. And you can look at the biblical facts, is that it was about 67 years after the head of gold was replaced with the chest of arms and silver. Of course, it will always be the one kingdom following the other one is more inferior. Gold, silver, and copper, iron, and mud. So what can you see? You see a degradation of the metals, going from good to bad. And so as the Gentile kingdoms follow one after the other, they get more worse and more bad. And me and you are right at this point in time here where these kingdoms are beginning to start to form the revived Roman Empire. So we are close to where we see the kingdoms of iron and mud. And iron and mud, they cannot mingle. They cannot mix. They don't cleave to each other. So you will see these kingdoms, they come together and then they burst. Then they come together and then they burst. Because iron and clay cannot be mixed together and stay together. But having said that, now we entered the second Gentile kingdom. And why is these kingdoms there? They are there by the purpose of God because of his people not listening to him. So this is a time of judgment. As long as this is here in the world, Israel is being judged. And I mean, it has started in 626 before Christ. It was the first marks of this kingdom rising up. Although only in 604 before Christ, we had the first Judean exiles going to Babylon. But as long as this image is there, it means Gentile nations will rule over Israel. So if I ask you today, if we look at this image, where are we in the timeline? We know from Bible prophecy we are there, which means Israel is still being trampled. They are still being put down, and you can see it even today. If you look at all the nations around them, they hate them, and they want to make sure that the Jewish nation will not be here on earth for a very long time. If they can have many of these nations what they want to kill every Jew on the planet. And for us, it's terrible because Jesus Christ himself is a Jew, and he came from the Jewish nation. And so we are to love them and pray for them and not try and have an anti-Semitic spirit. We are not allowed to do that. So looking at this, Daniel, he finds himself in another empire and he's one of the ministers of that empire. What is extraordinary, Daniel being now in his early 80s, probably according to scholars, what is amazing, 80 years old, and he's still a man of energy. He's got a bright brain, so much so that King Darius, the Mede, he was thinking to make him the head of all the ministers who have 120 satraps under them, governors. Satrap is like a governor. So Daniel, 80 years old, full of the Spirit of God, righteous man, full of integrity, and the king is thinking of making him number one in the ruler of his kingdom over all the others that are under him. How amazing. It is absolutely amazing. So, of course, what is interesting, when we were in the Golden Empire, only one ruled. What is different, his word is life and death. He kills, we wants to kill. He let live, we wants to let live. Here, you have the law of the Mede and the Persians. And the law of the Mede and the Persians will mean what is signed by the king, not even the king can later on change his mind. Unthinkable in this kingdom. In this kingdom, if this happened with Daniel, if what happened with Daniel and when Darius, when he signed that decree that the one that will pray to another god and not to him in 30 days will be cast into the lion's den, and King Darius couldn't stop it. If it happened here, the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, will tell them, "What do you think you are? I'm the king here. Get away from me. Let this man go free." So it shows you how the power is being lost. Now, it's not only one kingdom, although this is two kingdoms, the Medes and the Persians, they even divided into 120 provinces. So you can see there's a divide. Daniel, being one of the three governmental ministers, his heart was upright. And of course, everybody can see it. He was in a very important position. And now, the Bible tells us from verse 3 to 9, Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. A Jew over the whole kingdom. It's a Gentile kingdom, and the king, he has so much adoration for this Jew, he wants to make him the head of the whole of the kingdom. At this, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. There's a big problem. They got a sniff in the nose and they realized something is up. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Finally, these men said, "Well, we will never find any basis for charges against this man, Daniel, unless it has something to do with the law of his God." In other words, his religion. Let's look at his religion. We can't find it in his daily work, so let's get closer to him, to his heart. What is in his heart, in his religion? So the administrators and the satraps went as a group to the king. They all come together so that the king will not be misled. He will think Daniel is also part of this. So all the administrators, all the satraps were there. And so the king didn't notice that Daniel were absent. And so they went as a group and they said, "O King Darius, live forever." The royal administrators, the prefects, the satraps, advisors, and governors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or man during the next 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be thrown into the lion's den. They want this thing to be sorted out in 1 month. They want to get rid of Daniel within 1 month. Now, O king, issue the decree and put it in writing so that it cannot be altered. They know. In accordance with the laws of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed. So King Darius put the decree in writing. So, by looking at it, of course, it's just an evil conspiracy. And we know it is born out of envy because politically, nothing was wrong with Daniel in all his life. If you think about it, let's just make a sum. If Daniel was now round about 84 years old, just by guessing, because we cannot be out more than 2 or 3 years, 4 at the most. And Daniel is a young man of 14, was taken into exile. How many years have he ruled faithfully under different kings? How many years? 70 years. Never corruption found in him. Honest before God. Pray 3 times a day to his God for 70 years in the palace of the king. Never went left, never went right. Man of integrity, of honesty, upright man. So they came together and they said, and they agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce it. So, he did it. But if you think about it, King Darius, he was keenly aware of the fact that he decided to promote Daniel by making him responsible of the whole empire. What he did not notice is that when they led him into this plot, in this conspiracy, in this trap, he never realized what was going on. Because behind the scenes, there was an envy in the ranks of the other governmental officials, and their envy was directed against God's man, a Jew, Daniel, because he had made progress also in this new empire. Not only was he number 1 under King Nebuchadnezzar, now King Darius also wanted to make him number 1 under him. And they hated him. And they were determined to replace him, whatever means be necessary. If we can feed him to the lions, so be it. How evil can you be? We want him to become food of the lions. An old man in his 80s that didn't harm any one of them. It shows you, if you envy can make you murder somebody. They planned his death. They want him to die. And, honest or dishonest, they don't care as long as they're going to get rid of this man. And when they look at Daniel, they can find nothing wrong. He has done nothing wrong. There's no proof of misconduct. There's no corruption, no neglect found in all of Daniel's work. He was trustworthy. He was faithful in all of his administration. So the only possible way that they could find it, of course, was in his religion. They know something about this Jew, and that is that he has been honest before his God. He never compromised. And so they know he will not compromise his religion. And so the trap was, they know he always goes to his room 3 times a day. His windows is open to the east, because Babylon is west of Israel. And King Solomon, he asked the Lord that because of the temple that he built, if any Jew, any place on earth, would pray in the direction of the temple, will God that lives in heaven and sit on his throne, will he look down and hear the prayers of his people? Daniel read it many times. He made it part of his life. So he would always pray, all his life. He would pray in the direction of Jerusalem. So his windows, he will open it in the direction of Jerusalem, and he will fall on his knees and he will pray. Very, very diligently. It is quite amazing. I discovered the other day that all my life I've also been praying to the north, to the direction of Jerusalem. In my prayer room, I prayed to the north. In my previous prayer room, I also prayed to the north. It was just instinctively. I never planned it that way. But the way that my furniture has been placed there, it's always been like that. So I always pray in the direction of the north when I pray. Not that I'm a Jew. It was amazing to me when I discovered it. But here it is. They know that if they can catch him praying to his God and not to King Darius, he will be guilty. And the law of the Medes and Persians can't change. Not even the king. So, like I said, Nebuchadnezzar's word was above the law. But in the case of Darius, his word was subject to the law. Big difference from the golden kingdom to the silver kingdom. You can already see the difference there. So the Bible says, now when Daniel learned that the decree has been published, He went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened towards Jerusalem. 3 times a day, he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to God, just as he has done before. Then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. Did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or man except to you, O king, would be thrown into the lion's den? The king answered, the decree stands in accordance with the laws of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed. Then they said to the king, Daniel, and there they got him, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king. Can you see how they twisted? Daniel loved the king. He had great respect for the king. They tell him, no. He pays no attention to you, O king, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day. When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to save him. The whole day, he would talk to them, try to negotiate, try to change their minds. So, the fact that he signed and sealed the decree, totally unaware of the conspiracy. The fact is, Daniel was well aware of the conspiracy, and he was not willing to be put off the course that he has followed his whole life, to be honest and true to God, and he continued to worship the Lord. And 3 times a day, fall on his knees in his room and worship the God of heaven. Windows open, direction to Jerusalem, exactly according to King Solomon's plea with God in 1 Kings chapter 8. Of course, the consequences were that Daniel was accused that he had contravened the law of the king. The king realized that he was coerced into signing the laws. He realized it now. And he realized his own limitations, because what has been written could not save Daniel. He tried in vain the whole day and see if there's any way that he can get Daniel to come free and not be condemned to the lion's den. And of course, the pressure is on. Then the men, verse 15 and 16, went as a group to the king and said to him, remember, O king, now it's late in the day, sun is going down, that according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, no decree or edict that the king issued can be changed. So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, may your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you. That's my desire. So when that evening came, there was just no way. The scheme was, and the plot was against Daniel, and he had to be thrown into the lion's den. And what is amazing is that although they remind the king of the irrevocable nature of the law, they planned it all. The king had no choice. And one of the things that they did with lions is, except for hunting lions for recreation, some of the kings, they caught the lions, keep them in enclosures, they fed them, and it's just nice to see these lions with their family. But some of them, they would use the lions to maul people as a form of execution. That is to instill fear to their subordinates and to say, if you don't listen to me, you will be fed to the lions. Now, I've seen this in Kinshasa many times. I've been going to the Congo now for 27 years. And when I get to Kinshasa, they will many times take me to the palace of the king. What is for them. And even Joseph Kabila, which they saw as a president. And so, since the day of Mobutu Sese Seko, where the palace was, the pastors will take me there and say, I'm not allowed to take any pictures, so I don't have pictures of it. But then they will drive by, and they will do it quite fast around the palace with the road. And what is amazing is where the gates is. So there's a fence around with soldiers, and then there's a gate. The gate is formed on the 2 sides. It's like a tunnel. And there's wire on the left and on the right. So from the gate of the palace, for a few hundred meters, like at least 300, 400 meters, you have this 2 fences on the side. And then, of course, you have another fence Only then can you enter the grounds of the palace. And between these fences is packs of lions. Right in the city of Kinshasa, in the middle of the city. Saw it with my own eyes. So they put the lions there to make sure that nobody tried to get hold of the president and to kill him. In other words, how foolish that you have to have lions to protect you from your own people when you are voted in or you come in power. I mean, he came in with power, Joseph Kabila himself. I mean, I had to flee for my life. I was in Goma when Joseph Kabila came with his family from the Gate Africa Lakes in Kivu. That night, when they came through, I was there in Goma, and they saved my life. For me and three guys, three of us, myself and two, Christopher Horn here in Cape Town, and Freddie Warwick from Durban. The three of us, they airlift us with a small aircraft to fly over the soldiers as they're coming in, killing the people at that university there in Goma. I mean, I saw people in their hundreds and thousands running in the darkness of night to get away from all these soldiers. We fly right into a war zone, and they put us down there. And God saved our life. They could put us in a small aircraft and fly us 50 kilometers further to the north and drop us in a town called Butembo, which means City of No Lights. And from there, we would move still even further north to Beni. But the point is, when I think always back of that, and I realized when I was in Kinshasa, that you had lions to protect you from your own people. So because when Kabila, not the Kabila that was there the other day, but prior to him, his father, which many people believe that he murdered his own father or he arranged it. But what is amazing, when you look at all of this, is that you realize this is not only a new thing today. This has always been like that. They come in power and they want to be protected against their own people. So here, what we find is from verse 17, a stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den. Now, the king is no fool. He knows in his heart of hearts that Daniel is in trouble. He's now in the lion's den. I can do nothing about that. But I don't want something else to happen to Daniel. What are they going to plan tonight in the darkness of night? So what he did was the following. The king sealed the stone over the mouth of the den with his own signet ring, the king's ring, and with the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. Nobody must roll the stone away and do something else to him during the night. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating, without any entertainment, no wives, his concubines being brought before him, and he could not sleep. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions? Daniel answered, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight. Nor have I ever done any wrong before you, O king. The king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel from the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. You need to remember that the opening of the lion's den was well protected, because they didn't want the king, didn't want anybody to come and interfere. So not only was there a huge stone placed before it, but it was sealed with his own signet ring, as well as the rings of his officials. That will ensure that when they come there the next day, if anything has changed, then they know that there's been something else that has took place here. So Daniel, he could not escape from the lion's den, but on the same hand, nobody could enter the lion's den. Nobody can get to him, and he can't get out. So it is catch-22 situation. I mean, when we look at the king and his reaction, and that he was clearly distressed, we see that the fact that he went so far as to seal the opening of that lion's den with his own ring. The fact that he fasted during the night, couldn't eat. The fact that he wouldn't be entertained by any woman. The fact that he could not sleep. And the fact that he went at the dawn of day, when the first light came. That is why he would call to Daniel. He couldn't see the bottom. He couldn't look down because it was still dark. Because the Bible says when the first ray of light would come, he would quickly rush there. In other words, and because it's down, there's no sunlight really shining in. He couldn't clearly see. That's why he's calling, because it was still dusky and dark down there. He couldn't really see. And he was calling, Daniel, Daniel. And he so much wanted to hear his voice. He called with him. The Bible even said, with a sad voice. He expected no answer. In his heart of hearts, he knew. There was no joy when he called on Daniel. The Bible said, with anguish, and he was saddened with a sad voice. Daniel! And he was like with a crying voice, knowing it's not possible. What the king could not do to help Daniel, God did. The king has got only so much power. Especially being the kingdom of silver, where the law of the Mede and the Persians overrule, he didn't have much. He's a king, but didn't have really much authority. I mean, what great king are you if you can't even decide to save a man from a lion's den that's done nothing wrong? You couldn't even save him. What power does he really have? What a relief to hear these words from the mouth of Daniel. And he reminded Darius, the king, that he was innocent. Even the accusations against him, he did not commit any crime against the king. It was just a conspiracy. And of course, when they saw that nothing went wrong, the king couldn't wait to issue this command. At the king's command, the men, from verse 24 onwards, who had falsely accused Daniel were brought in and thrown into the lion's den, along with their wives and children. And before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. So they were actually all the time really hungry lions. Okay. Then King Darius wrote to all the peoples, nations, and men of every language throughout the land. What's this? May you prosper greatly. I issue a decree. Now he's writing again. He's writing again, and you can't change it. He knows it can't be changed. And listen what he writes this time. I issued a decree that in every part of my kingdom, people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. Wow. Wow. Can you believe it? A decree. And this decree is, you will fear and have reverence for the God of Daniel throughout my whole kingdom. And suddenly, all the Jews in the whole kingdom, what joy must have been in the nation's heart that was still in exile to hear these words, that their God, Yahweh, Elohim, Yahweh, the Lord God of heaven, that everyone must reverence him in this kingdom, this Gentile kingdom. Must have touched them very, very deeply, the Jewish people. See how God can take something and change it totally? That people, that they employ a plan against you, how God can change it. Of course, the fact that their wives and children all included, it shows the wrath of King Darius. is that he wouldn't stand what they've done. Not even their family should live. And of course, the result was this new decree, which is that you should tolerate the Jews and their God. I mean, he's not the first one. The one that did it prior to him was King Nebuchadnezzar. You will recall, he did exactly the same thing. When actually in Daniel chapter 3 and Daniel chapter 4, he would acknowledge the King of heaven, King Nebuchadnezzar. So even this Gentile king, Nebuchadnezzar, he acknowledged the God of heaven. Now we find in the next kingdom, the God of heaven is also recognized. And you know, when I look at these things of these Gentile nations, I couldn't help but think to myself, I wish that the United Nations, that 193 member states, because that's how many there are, currently United Nations in New York, where they have their headquarters. I mean, it's 193 nations of the world, all working together, and mostly the most important point on the agenda is to always fight the Jewish people in all the decisions they make. How terrible that to this day, because of the Gentile rule, we are here, and right here, you have 193 nations coming together in this great hall in New York, and all they want to do is diss the Jewish people. Fight them, work against them, plan against them. There's just a handful. I don't even know of 5 nations that I can sometimes say that will stand up, really go out of their way to support the Jewish people. So it is heartbreaking that when you look at these things, you realize that you do understand, because of the Gentile rule and the Gentile kingdoms, it is no surprise. That's the way the world acts. Because of the Gentile kingdoms. Because of the nation of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and God's promise that they will inherit the land of Israel, and they don't want them to settle there and stay there. Well, it ends, verse 27, verse 28. And he declares, King Darius, he rescues and saves, the God of heaven. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. He saw it with his own eyes. So Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus, the Persian. So there's still something to come. And of course, Daniel could continue to live a prosperous life because God allowed him. And the Bible is very clear in Daniel 10 verse 1. And from this we can conclude that Cyrus was the immediate successor of Darius, the Persian that took over. Makes me wonder, if I have to ask you a question, what of this beloved man Daniel, what of his actions made an impression on you? What challenges you? If you think now of Daniel chapter 6, what touches you the most? You would never deviate, not to the left, not to the right. What strikes you? His discipline, his prayer life. 3 times a day, go on his knees. He's a busy man. He's a minister in the kingdom, but he would make time for God. There's always a few minutes in a day that you will give to God. You know, I remember one of my friends told me some time ago that the president of of South Korea, went to go and visit a great man of God in his country. And I don't want to mention his name, but I know who he is. And he knew him personally. He had personal conversations with this great man of God. And so I know for a fact, because he told me of many, many occasions, he sat with one of this great men, one of the greatest men on the planet. And he sat with him many times, had many, many discussions with him. Had been in many meetings with him. He says, and one day, the president of South Korea just walked into the secretary's office and said he would like to have a word with the man of God. Is he here? And she said, yes, certainly, Mr. President. I'll let him know you are here. So she went to his office, and she came back and she says, unfortunately, he's in his prayer time now, and he says if you are prepared to wait 45 minutes, he can see you then. How many of you would do that? If you know the president waits at the door, what would you do? Throw everything down and run for the president. And it shows you his heart. His heart was fixed on God. He had his time of appointment with God. So she told him very nicely that he has appointment with the King of Heaven. And as soon as the appointment is over, which should be within 45 minutes, he will be able to see you. And he waited for that 45 minutes. And he had his meeting with the man of God. Do you have an appointment with God? Thank you. Next week, we are in the apocalyptic prophetic scriptures, Daniel chapter 7. Amen.